Help give kids an extra life by donating today to help sick and injured children. Link in the description and pinned comment below.
You have my sword. And you have my bow.
And my axe.
And my video! So, let's talk about Sega for a moment, shall we? Yep, twice in a row I'm covering an anniversary. This time, Sega's 60th year in operation. And to be honest, they've had success on several fronts. The Genesis was Nintendo's big competition in the 90s, the Master System was a success in Europe, the Dreamcast is a cult classic console, and I'm fairly certain that the failure of the Saturn outside of Japan came more down to the US and Japanese branches butting heads than the system itself. That, and the US didn't have Sega to Sanshiro. But even after getting out of the hardware business, Sega has still managed to stay in the game, even if their successes sometimes get overshadowed by their failures. Sega's more than just Sonic's identity crisis, you know, especially in the last few years. Miku and Yakuza continue to sell, PSO2 recently came west, and several other franchises have either been brought back or are getting spiritual successors. That being said, with revivals on the brain, there are some series that ought to be on their radar, especially from their massive arcade catalog. I covered one of their arcade franchises last Halloween with House of the Dead, and I'm doing another one this time. And if there's one classic Sega series that should rise from its grave, it's definitely Golden Axe. A high fantasy beat-em-up from the golden age of the genre. It's kinda like a D&D one-shot in the form of an arcade game. The game had 2 sequels on Genesis, as well as a few spin-offs, but what we're talking about today are the 3 arcade games in the series.
And the last we've seen from this franchise was 2008's Beast Rider. Oh yeah! We don't talk about that one.
So the axe after which the series is named is a weapon created by the divine survivors of a brutal war between the gods and a ruthless race of giants. Figures, wars involving gods may as well be on the high fantasy bingo board. While the gods ultimately did win, the evil giants had survivors among them. Eventually, the axe was stolen by one of their descendants, the evil Death Adder. You can immediately tell that he's the bad guy from his name alone, but just to hammer the point home, Sega decided to give him glowing evil eyes of evil. So this sets up the events of the original Golden Axe, which was released in 1989 and developed on Sega's System 16B arcade hardware. The game's main developer was Makoto Uchida, who's currently the head of R&D in Sega's Shanghai branch. He also had games like Altered Beast under his belt, which was the original launch title for the Genesis. So the plot picks up as Death Adder has kidnapped the king and princess of the Kingdom of Yuria, and has sent his evil armies of evil to ravage, subjugate, and burninate the countryside. The only hope lies with 3 brave warriors who each have enough bones to pick with Death Adder to build the exceptionally morbid character select screen. The Conan wannabe in blue is Axe Battler, who lost his mother to Death Adder's forces. Trust me, dude, I can relate. The woman of the trio is an Amazonian named Tyrus Flare, who lost both her parents to the Fiend's armies. And finally, we have the dwarf, Gilius Thunderhead, whose brother died trying to protect him, and has had the most recurring roles in future games among the heroes, as well as the most cameos in Sega crossovers. Having a long lifespan means you get more exposure, I guess. Also, Adder's Lair was the best track in All-Stars Racing Transformed, do not at me! Each of the 3 characters plays differently, as is to be expected from beat-em-ups at the time. Axe Battler is a balanced fighter who wields a broadsword despite literally having axe in his actual name. Gilius is physically the strongest of the 3, but the weakest in terms of magic, wielding an axe that looks suspiciously golden in color. Are we sure this isn't the Golden Axe that we've been looking for? Meanwhile, Tyrus, while not being able to deal as much damage with her longsword, has the highest magic potential of the heroes. The controls are simple: 8-way directional controls, and buttons for jumping, physical attacks, and magic. You can also dash by double tapping left or right. You have a variety of attacks, including weapon combos, jump attacks, and dash attacks. Of course, when there's a ton of enemies on screen, it might just help you to tap into your magic reserves. Each character has their own type of magic they can use. Gilius has thunder magic, Tyrus, of course, has super hot fire, and Axe has... The strength of your spell depends on the amount of meter bars you have filled. You fill your meter by knocking magic potions out of these little imps that show up from time to time. The thing is, the lengths of each magic bar aren't always the same. Sometimes you get a bar from one potion, sometimes it takes as much as 4. There's even a chance to beat up a couple of these midgets between levels to give you a head start in the next level. Technically, these are bonus stages, but for some reason, they're numbered like regular ones. While the game counts 9 numbered stages, the truth is that there's actually really only 5. The first level takes place in the wilderness as a soldier named Alex, who somehow knows all 3 heroes, informs the chosen heroes of the situation in his dying breath. And then the action begins as you start thwacking the crap out of Death Adder's goons. And you notice that when they die, they become colorless corpses instead of simply disappearing. Damn, this is morbid. Later, you see one of Adder's men tormenting a helpless peasant. Yeah, in case you haven't noticed already, the cruelty is the point. This is also where you find another mechanic in this game, mountable monsters. You can ride that chicken legs beast, but so can your enemies. While the range and power of that tail may not be the best weapon, it will help you with the 2 monstrous giants at the end of the stage. Now between stages, we have interludes on this little map as we get text updates on the situation. Stage 2, oh crap, fuck shit, I'm sorry. Stage 3 takes us through a place called Turtle Village, which is also being terrorized by Death Adder's forces. Here you can commandeer a freaking dragon with fire breath! Fuck yeah! So it turns out the village was literally on top of an actual giant turtle. Villages on top of animals. There's another space on the bingo board. And we already have a second dragon. This one shoots fireballs! Actual range! We soon come to a besieged town where the boss is an armored knight. Oh, so that's how it's gonna be, huh? Fine, be that way! Bitch. The next stage takes place along the Fiend's Path, which is actually on the back of a gigantic eagle. The main event here is a combo of skeletons and shadow enemies. Last stop, Uria Castle. After facing the toughest enemies as guards, we reach the throne room, where Death Adder's body forms from... snakes. Oh, I get it. And yeah, he's powerful as shit, wields a massive axe that looks more bronze than gold, and creates powerful shockwaves, but after a massive battle, the giant is defeated, gored by his own axe. Yeah, he ain't all that, even Cream the Rabbit isn't scared of him. So the king and princess are rescued, pieces restored, mark another spot off the bingo board, and we're left with the funniest ending in 80s arcade games as all the characters bust out of an arcade cabinet and into the real world. Wouldn't be surprised if that would actually happen in 2020. Okay, so while parts of Golden Axe are a little dated, such as some uncertainty with hit detection at points, a lot of it holds up really well. The presentation is great for its time, sprites are clean, and the music takes advantage of the hardware sound font really well. The gameplay is definitely a product of the golden age of beat-em-ups, a statement I mean in the best way possible. Controls and combos are responsive, and the characters are unique enough to feel like their own selves. We ain't talking about Bimmy and Jimmy here. Overall, this is a great game and an absolute classic to any fan of Sega. And I mean Sega as a whole, not Sonic's unpleasable fanbase. Now, the game got a couple of sequels on the Genesis, but Golden Axe 2 was decried as being a cookie-cutter sequel, and the third wasn't even widely released in the States until it showed up on a PS2 collection. Though, given what a lot of people say about Golden Axe 3, that might not have been such a bad thing. The next proper sequel in the arcades was Golden Axe: The Revenge of Death Adder. The game was released in 1992 on Sega's System 32 arcade board, and as of the time I wrote this, has not been released since in any form, though it is getting a release on an arcade 1-up machine, and it's being included on Sega's Astro City Mini in Japan. Speaking of which, Sega, please release that thing internationally. You will make a ton of money. A literal ton. Seriously, I'll find someone to buy you a theoretical scale so you can weigh all the money you'd be making. Anyway, so years after the original game, Death Adder is back and wreaking havoc o'er the land from his very tyrant-looking castle. Meanwhile, since Gilius is the only one of the original heroes still alive, dwarves have long lifespans, don't forget, we have 4 new heroes to choose from. Sternblade the Barbarian, who's your bog-standard swordsman, Goa the Giant, who carries an axe while Gilius rides on his back, Little Trix, a man of small stature who carries a pitchfork, and Dora, a centaurus whose weapon came straight out of American Gladiators.
The 90s version, not the one with that racist POS Hulk Hogan.
I'm going to say this right now. It boggles my mind that Sega never brought this to any home console, because this is a distinct improvement on the original in virtually every way. The combat is more refined with more options for each character, graphics are really good for early 90s, and the music is really good too, though you'll hear songs repeated multiple times throughout the game. Magic works a bit differently this time. Instead of building up potions to power up your spell, you now require a fixed number of pots to cast. Just like before, each character has their own magic. Sternblade uses 9 pots to cast fire to blaze it, Gilius uses 13 pots from the back of Goa to summon a skull that can petrify weaker enemies, Dora uses 4 pots to cast lightning magic, and Little Trix has the only healing magic in the entire franchise, which costs 4 pots. The variety of monsters has also improved, including living zombie trees, guys in tribal masks, and more. There's also more mountable monsters, including fire-breathing mantises and scorpions with electric tails. Also, as a nice little detail, Dora can morph her lower half into human legs to ride monsters. PSA, centaurs are not mounts unless they volunteer to be. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. The stages themselves are quite a bit more involved, including places where you can save caged villagers. Always do this. I don't know what it gets you, but do it out of the goodness of your heart. This is your shopping cart test, people. Show me you're capable of self-governance. Also, there are some segments that scroll into the screen instead of the standard issue left to right. Strangely, these are auto-scrolling sections, but they're never obtrusive. Small miracle, that. One last change to the level design is the addition of branching paths. It's always nice when a game does that. And one final QOL detail, you can switch characters when you continue.
Why couldn't you do that in the original? Was the technology just not there? Please tell me someone made a ROM hack where you could do that.
The journey takes us on a mission through the woods, attempting to rescue captured villagers, infiltrating an enemy town, followed by sneaking aboard a ship, hitching a ride on a dragon, and finally reaching Death Adder's castle where we... Wait a minute. Did HAL Labs actually rip off Sega? My whole life is a lie! Meanwhile, it looks like Death Adder learned some new tricks since the last time he got his snake ass whooped. He has a shield with a dragon head on it that spits out spells and will eat your magic if you try to cast. Which I didn't during my playthrough. Once you knock that shield away, he swings that axe around and creates massive shockwaves. And he's so obsessed that even after you've beaten him, he Hulk jumps aboard your dragon to fight you one last time. And even then he tries to unleash one last spell before Gilius makes the ultimate sacrifice and plants his axe into the snake's head. With Death Adder defeated and the Golden Axe secured, the journey ends in a bittersweet victory. But not before one last gag scene. Again, I reiterate, why has it taken Sega so long to bring this sequel out of the arcade? Maybe it was because by the time a proper port would have been finished, it would have been the mid-90s when the popularity of beat-em-ups was starting to wane. So, how would Sega take the classic series forward in such a day and age? Why, with a fighting game spin-off, of course! The beginning of 1995 saw the release of Golden Axe The Duel in Japanese arcades. The game was developed for Sega's STV arcade hardware, and while the arcade version never left Japan, the Saturn port did, though not until June of 1996. Sega to Sanshiro would have made sure it got here faster. So about 80 years after the last battle with Death Adder, the Golden Axe has re-emerged and is more powerful than ever. So 10 warriors emerge to battle for it. They are Kind Blade, the Ryu of the game, Million Flare, the descendant of Tyrus, Gilius Rockhead, the descendant of Gilius Thunderhead, Soma, an evil sorcerer, Doc, a medical teacher who resigned to seek the axe, Keel, a murderous elf who uses ice daggers, Jam, a girl who learned to fight from animals, Ponchos, the son of an inventor, Green, a half-plant giant, and Death Adder, who is back yet again. I swear, this guy's like the Shredder of high fantasy. You pick a character and engage in standard best-of-3 battles, loser pays, winner stays, yeah, we've seen it all before, it's your bog-standard 2D fighter. Arcade mode takes you through all of the opponents, culminating in a battle against Death Adder, and then you fight the avatar of the axe itself. And as fitting for fighting games, the final boss is absolutely brutal.
I said I liked fighting games. I never said I was good.
So the presentation for this game is great for its time. The sprites look really good, and the animations and backgrounds are really well detailed. The game also controls well enough for the most part. It's a 6-button fighter not unlike Street Fighter with motion-based special moves. When I say that Kind Blade is the Ryu of this game, I mean it right down to the special moves. Of course, this was before the days when 2D fighters thrived on flashy combos and complex mechanics and all that, so combos are basic AF here. I do have a couple of issues with this spin-off that keep a simply good game from being great. One of them is that the soundtrack is very hit or miss. There are a few tracks that sound really good, and others that happen to be mishmashes of notes that have no coherence whatsoever. More importantly, is how supers work. In most fighting games, you build up your super meter by delivering or taking damage, or occasionally charging it up manually. In this game, however, you fill it by grabbing magic pots. And how do you obtain magic pots? From these imps again! And you never know when they're gonna show up, so you can't rely on them. It's like the courier from the early Samurai Showdown games, except this is the only way to fill your meter. And once you collect 5 pots, you can hit all 3 punches or kicks to enter a hyper mode where your attack and defense are temporarily boosted. This is the only time you can use your super, and considering some of the motions for these moves are on par with SNK's infamous pretzel, you may be better off just using the boost. So, that's Golden Axe the Duel. A standard enough fighting game, but not much more. So that begs the question. How would a revival of this franchise work in this day and age, especially after the failed attempt at a reboot? We might actually have a possible answer to that question already without even knowing. Sega's recently had a good working relationship with French developer Lizardcube and publisher Dotemu. These fine people were responsible for an excellent remake of Wonder Boy: The Dragon's Trap, and more recently, the awesome Streets of Rage 4. Both of these games feature impeccable hand-drawn graphics and great soundtracks that do justice to their respective series. More importantly, the gameplay of these games show a great amount of respect for the franchises they've been tackling. If there were a developer I would trust with this classic franchise, it would definitely be these guys. Get the original composer on the project, and you'd be golden. I am 1000% not sorry.
The thing is, even with the several franchises Sega's been working on to remind us of their existence, there's still plenty more that could be waiting in the wings. Virtua Fighter, Crazy Taxi, hell, how about a new Shinobi? I've said it before, Sega's more than just Sonic. But that's another story. I'm the Quarter Guy, and until next time, the arcade is closed.